Dynamic? I have to be dynamic? Jed was pretty dynamic. It's hard to compete with. So, there was an election recently. I don't know how you come out, but are you happy?
Yeah!
So I have to wonder about that because my wife is practically in tears. My daughter, who is not a kid, she's 30, she's a physician, she broke down in her office and cried because she's just so upset that this sexist man who inspires racism is now going to be president. And I've been very critical of Trump on my TV program. He is a narcissistic bully and has some bad economic ideas. And yet the election returns come in and humiliate me because I have a syndicated column that goes out on Wednesday. I had to write it Tuesday, and I believed the betters. I was so sure. I wrote a whole, now we have to deal with Hillary column. And then I was proven wrong. I was humiliated, and people around me are shaking. I live in New York. I live across the hall from Mike Mescon's cousin, actually. They're all either from, full spectrum, from the left to the extreme left. And they're hysterical, and I'm critical of Trump, and yet I'm feeling this glee. And I'm not sure what that's about. Is it because I like Trump, or because I was just sick of Hillary and her people? So, can I take a poll? Who here is happy because you like Trump? Who here is happy because Hillary is not president? Well, this is what I was experiencing, and I'm like tonight to try to get my brain around that. If I can make the thing work, that I learned my views of the world when I was in college, and at the time, are we going? Are we getting there? Yeah, that's this old picture. I was drinking, I didn't learn a lot, but what I did learn at the time, what I did learn at the time, and the person on the far left is Harvey Cheatham. He's from Atlanta. Anybody know him? Was my professors had taught me that we knew how to fix poverty now, because there was just no excuse that people were poor in this rich country, and all it took was social programs, welfare. This would teach poor people how to do better. That would give them money to the ones who were truly helpless, and poverty was over. And I believed it, and I went out in the world reporting on that. And the basic structure of it is that there are experts who know things, and they can plan life better. And that has continued to prevail. The idea that if you want to change the light bulb, why not have some guy who went to Harvard direct it? And you may believe in free markets here, but you're not normal people. Because most Americans believe in that. It's intuitive, central planning. Yes, the Soviet Union failed, but most people don't pay attention to that. But we grow up in families where if we don't listen to mommy and daddy, we might get hurt. Evolution taught us that for thousands of years, if you don't listen to the tribal elders and harvest the fruit when they say, you may starve. So we are programmed to believe the planner. And I sure believed, and part of that planning was that business, you people, are greedy capitalists. You win, poor people lose. And a lot of you cheat. And some of you may cheat. And I reported on that for years. I won lots of awards for doing that kind of reporting. Media people love to reward reporters who criticize business. I don't win those awards anymore. But eventually I wised up. I saw that, yes, sometimes people would pass laws because of reports I did. They created the Oregon Department of Consumer Affairs because of my exposés. And I was so proud. These politicians were paying attention to young John Stossel. But then I watched the regulators work, and I saw it didn't change anything. There was still a little fraud. Most of the people were honest. So what were the regulators doing? I'd go down there, and they were sitting in a dreary building, and they were licensing businesses, having them fill out forms. And we like the idea. We license dogs, we license drivers. We think it makes us safer. But I soon saw that it doesn't. It just makes everything cost more, employs some lawyers, delays innovation because the people who don't know how to get the license have to go underground. The immigrant who doesn't know the rules, or everybody just has to pay more, and your business is less efficient. By contrast, and when the government did step in and would come after the bad guy, and they eventually would catch some of these cheaters, it was rare. But it took 5 years. And then they would sue the bad guy, and the bad guy would use our very slow legal system to hire his own defense lawyer who would hold the regulator off the state's attorney, the attorneys general, for 5 years. And at the end of that, they would sign a consent order. We don't admit to doing anything wrong, but we won't do it anymore. They pay the lawyers, and maybe they would just move to a different county or a different state, and the cheating would go on. It didn't make life better for consumers. And what I soon saw was that what does make life better, I mean, Dodd-Frank isn't going to make life safer for people who take out mortgages or engage in banking. It just drives the little guys out. They keep adding these rules. And Dodd-Frank's a good example. That Sarbanes-Oxley was supposed to fix everything after Enron. Didn't, so now we got Dodd-Frank. That's made things worse. It's gotten to the point that I once tried to legally open a lemonade stand outside Bill O'Reilly's office at Fox. I had 60 days before I had to air my story, and I couldn't get legal permission. You had to take a food safety course. You had to pass a test. You had to get a government-approved fire extinguisher. Layer after layer after layer, all in the name of protecting the public. I would say, as a free market guy, it's not in the interest of the lemonade seller to poison his customers. But there would still be reckless people who would, and we have to have rules to stop it, is what people intuitively say. This, of course, kills opportunity. Now, in some ways, I'm happy because I want to believe Donald Trump understands that. He's been a businessman. He understands that too many rules kill opportunity, and I'm delighted he's appointed some good people on his transition team who understand that. So maybe he gets that. Maybe he understands the invisible hand. But most Americans don't. It's hard to get your brain around Adam Smith's idea. First of all, Adam Smith looked like a fat cat, and most Americans won't believe anybody who looks like that. But also, it's the invisible hand. It's invisible. You can't see it. It's hard to get your brain around that. I prefer Friedrich Hayek's phrase, spontaneous order. That people working on their own, for their own interests, spontaneously create good things, and you won't get customers if you don't. I mean, a way to think about spontaneous order is to think about a skating rink. If you had never seen one and I told you, you're the regulators, I'm a new entrepreneur, I want to create this new business, I'm going to rent a big building and put water in the ground, freeze it, and then charge people money to strap sharp blades on their feet, to zip around on this ice, young people, old people, skilled, unskilled, and there are going to be no rules except go counterclockwise. You would say, no, this is too dangerous. You got to have skating stoplights, skating police. But it works. There's a spontaneous order that works better than any of that. If you had skating police telling people what to do, they'd bump into each other. In fact, we tried this for TV, and they do. We even got Brian Boitano to direct people. They still bumped into each other. The spontaneous order works. And maybe Donald Trump understands this because he sees how slow government is in New York City. the skating rink, Woolman Rink in Central Park. The city couldn't successfully build it for 6 years. So Trump stepped in and finished it in 3 months. So yes, he gets it. But then he explains that he's anti-trade. He doesn't get it. Most people don't get it. A lot of people say capitalism, all right, it's good for some stuff. It brings us some stuff we want, movies, music. But when it comes to complicated things, your institute has heard this about education. Education doesn't work as a market. It's just too complex. The parent doesn't know what the curriculum should be, who the best teachers are. You got to have government expert guidance. Anything complicated, but healthcare, that's why you got to have government running healthcare, because the market doesn't work. Too complicated. But cars are complicated. Computers are complicated. They work better. I don't know what makes one car run better than another or safer than another. I'm no automotive engineer, but it's hard to get really ripped off buying a car in Georgia. Compare the worst you can buy here with the absolute best the central planners could produce. That was the Trabant for you younger people. You know, remember, this was the pride of the Eastern Bloc. We make jokes about, Joe's no rocket scientist, but this was designed by East German rocket scientists. And yet, it was a horrible car. It polluted, it was hard to drive. He had to put the oil and gas in separately and then shake the car to mix them together. And as soon as the Berlin Wall went down and there was competition, there was a 5-year waiting list to get one in the Soviet bloc. But when the wall went down, it disappeared. So did the Yugo. Their best, designed by planners, couldn't compete with our mediocre stuff because we have a market. The market works miracles. You don't have to be an expert. You just need a few people who are, a few car buffs, or a few of you who read the car magazines and pay attention. And through word of mouth in a free society, the good news and the bad news spreads. The good companies thrive, bad ones atrophy, and they all get better. It's wonderful. But people don't get that. The other critics of capitalism say, well, even if you buy that, you got to have government to keep the customers and the workers safe, because the factory owner doesn't give a damn if he has dangerous conditions and workers are hurt. We got to have OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, to just have some rules to protect workers. And at the beginning, they have a booklet of rules, and now, of course, it would go from here to the ceiling, and only specialist lawyers understand it. But the head of OSHA under President Clinton was fond of showing this chart that shows how workplace deaths have dropped since OSHA began. And injuries went down at about the same rate. And you could say, all right, well, this is a reason you got to have government for that. Except some researchers then went out and looked at workplace deaths and injuries since a few years before OSHA was created and discovered this. Things were getting better on their own. In a free society, that happens. When there's an accident, people get smarter. They make adjustments. The unions protect people. As we get richer, people care more about safety. Even the most venal factory owner cares because it costs him money to replace workers he kills. To be as crass as I can be. The free market makes life safer. Government is like somebody who sees a parade and then jumps in front of a parade and says, I led the parade. Pay me more. And we do. All these rules have unintended consequences. Now, some industries don't open because there are too many rules. I mean, my original fantasy that I got from college, that government would fix poverty, let's consider that. When welfare began, the poverty rate did drop sharply, first 7 years. But since then, as you look down the line, it's gone up and down because government planning has unintended consequences. It taught some people to be dependent, not to work, that they were entitled to a handout. Progress stopped, but progress had been vast. Look what was going on before the war on poverty. Americans were lifting themselves out of poverty all the time. We created a program that's now spent $20 trillion over the years. No, that can't be right. I'm sorry, I'm messing that number up, but it's more than $1 trillion. And we stopped progress. That's what government often does, and yet people don't get that. People believe in it. Next time it'll help, and government continues to grow. This is a graph of spending since the beginning of the Republic. As you can see, I mean, think about what should... Let me walk around. Is this working too? You'll turn that on back in the back room. Hello? Is this now? And here? Maybe I won't walk around.
I turned it on.
Oh, now it's working. Good. Nice. How big should government be?
How do you get it on?
Guys, turn this on, please.
It is on. It is on?
Okay, never mind.
Is
What's the right size? Should government be 5% of the economy? 10%? When I ask this, people say 5 or 10, sometimes they say 12. But for most of the history of America, when we grew the fastest, when we went from first world to third world, government was less than 5% of the economy. The first little blip was World War I, then World War II. But government shrank again after the wars. It's only since Richard Nixon and the Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty that the line starts to go straight up and never goes down. Now, government is 40% of the economy. And people, and Hillary wanted it to do more. Trump, I don't know, he wants it to do more too. He wants it to regulate trade. He wants a minimum wage. I don't know what to think. You talked about eminent domain tonight. Trump's kind of a crony capitalist. Look, eminent domain is valid, and there are times when you need to take somebody's private property by force because they're being unreasonable, and you need to build a hospital or a railroad. But Trump used it to expand the parking lot for his casinos. And when I confronted him about that once, I was trying to think of the cleverest TV way I could do it. So I said, you know, in the old days, you real estate developers brought out thugs and people wouldn't sell to you, you beat them up. But now you use politicians. You go to your cronies in politics and you get them to use the law to force people out. And he said, John, that is very unfair. These aren't cronies. These are honorable public servants. I want him to do well. I really want him to, I want to believe he believes in markets, but I'm scared. David Bowes of the Cato Institute, warned me after I called him and said, I heard this senator candidate speaking, and he was great. He really gets it. It was Marco Rubio. He gave a great speech. Bowes said, don't fall in love with a politician. They will break your heart every time. And he's right. And you know, a politician can't make America great again. I mean, why is America great? Why are we prosperous? The chaplain-to-be made a point about this being a great country. One reason we're a great country is because we're prosperous. We went from poverty to wealth. So I once assembled a big group of New Jersey auditorium in a high school in New Jersey and asked them, 7 billion people in the world. Most of them, life sucks. Maybe 1 billion live anywhere near a level of comfort. 2 billion live on $1 or $2 a day, try to live miserable lives. How come we do so well when the rest of the world doesn't? Silence. Finally, a kid stands up and says, because we invented democracy. He doesn't know about the Greeks. And look, democracy's good, no quarrel there. Another kid stands up and says, we were a relatively new country and we had natural resources. And those are good. But I could say, well, India's poor. India has democracy and natural resources. One kid says, well, India's overpopulated, that's why they're poor. But actually it happens that the population density of India is exactly the same as America's most populous state, which happens to be New Jersey. And I could say, well, New Jersey's doing okay, same population. You wouldn't think so here in Georgia, but it was better than India. So again, why is America prosperous? If it's democracy, natural resources, think about Hong Kong. This is Milton Friedman's insight. It didn't have democracy. It had the British dictators, kings, and royalty, and then it had the the Chinese communists telling them what to do. And yet Hong Kong went from third world to first world in record time. While most of the world is poor, Hong Kong has roughly our level of wealth. What did they have? No democracy, no natural resources, it's just a rock. They had the secret for prosperity. We ought to know what it is now, because we've seen it work in the United States and Hong Kong, Australia, a number of countries, parts of Europe. It's economic freedom. I went around the world trying to start a business. I couldn't get it done in India. It would take 2 years to get all the permits. At the time, you had to get 10 permits to buy a computer. In Hong Kong, I could open a business in 1 hour for 24 bucks. It was a stupid business selling Disney frisbees and yo-yos that didn't go anywhere. But that opportunity to try something is what allows people to become prosperous. We see what works. It's what you preach. But people don't get that. I think they don't get it for the same reason that Donald Trump opposes trade. People think of business as a zero-sum game. Somebody came up to me in the street in New York and said, "You John Stossel?" "Yes." "I hope you die soon." So, at first I thought he was hating me because I'm in New York City and they think of me as a conservative, and that's like being a child molester in Manhattan. But I'm not a conservative. I'm a libertarian. I believe in social freedoms. They were just mad at me because I was a consumer reporter who is now saying government's a bigger problem. Business is okay if you leave them alone. Why are they so angry about that? Is it envy? Because they all went to fancy colleges and were taught by professors who went to fancy colleges, and those professors are secretly furious at their slightly stupider roommate who went into business and made more money than they did. And it's envy. But then I thought about the kings and queens of old Europe. They're 1,000 times richer than the average person. They were revered. But the Europeans criticized the bourgeoisie. They gave them that nasty name. They attacked the very people who sold them the things they needed to make their lives better. Why? And I think it's because without an economic education, you think of business as a zero-sum game. If I win, you lose. It's Trump's thinking about trade. If China won something, we must have lost. He ought to see that everybody wins. It's not like Bill Gates, there's a pie, and he took a huge chunk, so we have less. He baked 1,000 new pies. Because business only happens if it's voluntary. Only 2 ways to do things in life: forced or voluntary, right? Now, we need some force. Hong Kong was prosperous in America because it had not just economic freedom, it had a rule of law. And the British rulers were brilliant. They enforced laws against robbery and murder. But then they did something wonderful. They practiced benign neglect. They sat around and drank tea. But you do need rule of law. And then free people produce amazing things. Our tendency to stop all innovation is why we haven't recovered from this recession. A regulator thinks he's not doing his job unless he's passing more laws. And who becomes a regulator in the first place? Who joins the EPA? Except for environmental zealots. It's not totally true, but most of the people who want to make rules are people who want to run your life. And they will always make more rules. And the economy will suffer. So when Donald Trump and his people say, we're going to make America great again from Washington, I have to say, no, they can't. And this was originally making fun of Obama for his yes, we can thing, which came to mean government. But we can't. Government can't, they can't, politicians can't. But let's remember that free people in America do all the time. You do it through your charity work, through organizations like the Georgia Public Policy Institute, the way you take care of people in your family, the effort you put into raising your children and making them good citizens, maybe work you do through your church, but also the greedy stuff you do. What have we gotten through your pursuit of profit? The best of life. We just take it for granted. We don't think about it. Air conditioning, flush toilets, computers, cars. Do you thank free markets when you go to a supermarket? You ought to, because it's a miracle. 35,000 products on average. It's well lit. It's open 24/7 often. They rarely poison you. The food is unbelievably cheap. We take it for granted. We take it for granted that you can go to a foreign country and stick a piece of plastic in the wall and cash will come out. Or you can give the same piece of plastic to a total stranger and he'll rent you a car for a week. Guy doesn't even speak your language. Just accept that. It's a miracle. Government couldn't do that. When you get home, Visa or MasterCard will have the accounting correct to the penny. If they don't, you'll scream. But government can't even count votes accurately. And the instinct of Americans is to ask government to run healthcare and education and more. Maybe this election is a turning point. For me, it's like, yes, no more Hillary and her bureaucrats telling me what to do. But we have a long way to go before we can convince most Americans that freedom works better. Thank you for fighting for that. And good night.